And if you do that on all your builds, you'll never encounter a problem. That is the absolute key to every custom build you'll ever do. All right, so the story goes that at the dawn of nuclear winter, a group of rail workers and their families found shelter at the rail yard to wait things out while the world burned. In the years leading up to the collapse, the rail industry started pushing the limits of safety with longer and longer freight trains, often lacking a caboose because it didn't generate revenue. The cabooses had their own little neighborhood at the rail yard, and that's where the rail clan bunked, deep inside the inner workings, far from the barbed wire fence. The cabooses were perfect. They had sleeping quarters, an office, maps of the rails. They were the perfect recreational vehicle, a caboose RV, or CRV, if you will. One wife of a rail worker, Carla, but everyone called her Smokey, could grow anything anywhere, especially medicinal herbs that kept the anxiety low and the focus high. Smokey adapted her hydroponic skills to growing crops inside empty freight cars. Attacks were infrequent in the early times, just small, displaced groups, malnourished and crazy from the cold. They could smell the fresh food, but there were no plumes of smoke they could key in on because another wife of a rail worker, Bonnie, known as Mrs. Invisible, or Mrs. I for short, was an expert on solar energy in the before times. So the rail clan stayed fed and warm and didn't draw any unwanted attention. Just a mile away was an e-vehicle dealership. Smokey and Mrs. Invisible sent their men out to harvest the motors from what were now paperweights under the snow. After several trips, the rail clan now had dozens and dozens of these powerful electric motors. The wives were not only able to adapt them to solar energy, but create a coil system that kept the engines warm enough to operate in the blistering cold and have almost unlimited range due to the recycling of energy, like a combustion engine keeps its battery charged with an alternator. They first built silent trains, but marauders tore up the tracks. Several patrols never returned. As strongholds fell, more attackers arrived at the rail yard. The barbed wire held for a time. The wives directed their husbands to junkyards for parts, axles, frames, the biggest tires they could find. They had to build a vehicle that wasn't reliant on the tracks. The rail clan developed their first CRV, complete with a turret, sand-filled tires that could navigate the deepest snow and mud, and plenty of built-in firepower. The prototype worked as they intended. Better, actually. It moved really fast, cleared any obstacle, and the only noise it made was crunching snow. Smokey and her husband Doug, and Mrs. Invisible and her husband Stu heard a great attack, jumped inside the CRV for shelter, and watched the rail clan suffer its final defeat. So they rolled out, following a train track at first, fooling the attackers into thinking it was just shaken loose from the explosions, until it turned onto a road and silently raced off into the distance. This was one of the last invitational builds I participated in before I launched my YouTube channel. I went all out with the diorama last year, so this year was no different. Except it was, as it was raining and I had to move into my paint booth on the back deck. So back to the story. Into the wasteland, beyond their home city, it was quiet and beautiful. Danger would ring out when a stray bullet would flatten itself against the iron exterior, but there wasn't much resistance out there. Flattening snow drifts and avoiding paths whenever they could, warm with bellies full, moving forward, sometimes realizing the journey was their destination. Here's some pictures from their trip. Thanks to Jim Silva for hosting this annual build. If you visit his channel, He's compiled a playlist of build videos from all those who posted on YouTube. A link to his channel is in the description below. This was a fun one, and I look forward to participating in the Winter in the Wastelands 4 next year. If you haven't already, I sincerely encourage you to subscribe to my channel, and to all those who participated. There's some really creative folks out there doling out the inspiration by the bucketful. For Spork Syndicate, this is Tom, wandering aimlessly. Or am I? Managed to install my busted TV as a steady light. But damn, I think I ruined my paint booth. Woo. Woo.